Hello, I'm Dr. John Kruse, and today I'm going to be talking about imposter phenomena and ADHD. I'll be talking for about 20-25 minutes. There'll be an opportunity to type in questions at the end, or you can do that later when this is posted on YouTube or Facebook. So I usually start with the take-home message, and the take-home message for today is that yes, imposter phenomena does seem to exist as a real style or trait of the way some people deal with their successes in the world. It does seem to be more common among those with ADHD, and we'll be getting into why that might be so. And there do seem to be a number of ways to help someone with imposter phenomena. I almost said syndrome. I'll get later on to why phenomena is the preferred choice. But there are ways to work on and reduce this because the classic version of it produces a lot of distress and anxiety and discomfort. So psychologist Pauline Clance worked with a student working with her, Susan Imes, in 1978 and published a paper that described, and this was research to the extent it was sort of exploratory research. It was a description of a collection of women who were all high achievers by academic standards, yet these women all struggled to recognize and feel their accomplishments, and as a result, so they had trouble recognizing and accepting their accomplishments. They attributed the successes they had had to things like luck or the benevolence of someone else, or maybe extreme hard work that they put in, and devalued their own innate abilities like intelligence or creativity. And because of this formulation that they had, they then again viewed their presentation of the outside world as a facade or a fake, or not accurately in line with who they really were, what their real abilities were. And they felt that they had actually succeeded in fooling others in positions of authority or the general public into believing that they were more talented or capable than they really felt inside. And as a result, these women felt that they would be exposed, that their fraud, that their imposter would be revealed, and then their careers would be destroyed. So a few other aspects of this, again, these women had trouble celebrating or acknowledging their success. They tended to diminish or demean when they were successful, that didn't mean anything. It wasn't really a valid measure of any ability. It was just luck that they did well on it. They lived in, again, constant fear that they were going to be caught, and particularly they were fearful of tests or situations in the real world where they would have to reveal their true competency and abilities. And when such a test or such an opportunity was apparent, was there, they would fail at that. So there was constant worrying about what the results, when they might be exposed. And yet at the same time, unlike someone, so many of these people in subsequent tests studies have shown that there's some overlap between perfectionism and imposter phenomena. But with pure perfectionism, someone who wants and feels and compelled to be perfect and hold themselves to extremely high standards, true perfectionists don't reveal that they aren't meeting those standards. That's too painful to acknowledge or admit. They'd rather not turn in any homework rather than anything. Whereas with imposter phenomena, these people usually readily demean themselves or tear themselves down or acknowledge their failures, because again, that seems in line with how they are feeling about themselves. So I didn't say it already. So the people with imposter phenomena are constantly comparing themselves to others, fearing and dreading situations where they might be evaluated again and found lacking, and fearing they would be destroyed. And in addition to significant overlap with perfectionism, anxiety, particularly social anxiety, seemed to be prominent among this group of women. Again, these were all women that were looked at. And the Clance and Imes speculated that there were two major family constellations that they saw as contributing to the origins of imposter phenomena. One was a situation where the child, the girl in question, was overvalued, overpraised, was treated as the golden special child who knew everything or was brilliant or extremely talented. And the problems arose when that person, not actually being completely perfect, saw that in the real world, sometimes they did make mistakes, sometimes they were fallible, sometimes they weren't living up to this image of a perfect individual. So the discrepancy or the difficulty came is one self-image was cast by their parents, telling them they were one thing, and the world and their own experience were telling them a different experience. And these two conceptions of who they were as a person did not match or meld. And in an attempt to deal, again, not at a conscious level, with this discrepancy, the imposter phenomena seems to evolve. The second set of individuals or origins in the original paper suggested almost the opposite situation, in that the child, again, the girl, because these were all women, was not there was another child who was the favored one, who was really the bright one, who was really the brilliant one, really the talented one, really the golden child. And this second child was repeatedly told, often directly, sometimes indirectly, but compared to their sibling, told that they weren't as smart, that they weren't as talented, they weren't as capable, they wouldn't go as far. And again, many of these people worked hard, were actually smart, intelligent, and talented. And then in the real world, they could see that they were succeeding far more than their family thought they should be or were capable of. So again, there's the same discrepancy coming from slightly different ways of the world giving them some information about who they were as successful and competent, and that family construct telling them, no, 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 you're not. You're incompetent. You're not as good as your brother or sister. There has not been a lot of extensive research since then confirming whether these are common origins for imposter phenomena. There's very little research suggesting whether, if these are two basic modes of arriving there, whether those have slightly different aspects of traits or characteristics to them. One of the other postulates, so imposter syndrome or phenomena, was framed as successes in the academic or intellectual sphere, a lot of which is academically oriented. So it wasn't addressing success in sports. It wasn't addressing success in other parts of the world. And the claim was this was particularly prone to occur in families that were overvaluing the importance of intellectual success. There's at least one study that tried to confirm that and didn't find a particularly strong overemphasis on intellectual success. So that's, in a 8-minute nutshell, what imposter phenomena is. So what it isn't is also worth pointing out. One is it's not actually being an imposter. In fact, a better name, I would argue, would be pseudo-imposter syndrome. So these are not people who are clearly trying to take on other roles. These aren't George Santos claiming to be a volleyball star and another thing, knowing, and a graduate of college and a person who created a organization to rescue pets and take care of them. These are not people who are intentionally lying and creating a false image for the world. So these are not, so again, I would argue pseudo-imposter phenomena might be a better title. So even though it was 45 years ago, both Clance and Imes, and I hope I'm not butchering their names, are still alive. And there is some regret on their part that their idea, which I think still has good validity, has been broadened and expanded and is almost universally, outside of academia maybe, referred to as imposter syndrome. So the word syndrome implies directly that this is a pathology, that this is a unhealthy negative way to respond to the world, and phenomena is a much more neutral, that this is an observation, that this is a path that certain women develop. So a few other things. Research has extensively shown that this is not purely women are not the only ones who develop imposter phenomena. And although I said this is not about truly being an imposter, that it might be called pseudo-imposter phenomena, there's also some interesting studies showing that maybe there are two different but overlapping phenomena. One is what they call true imposter phenomena, which is what I've just sort of largely described. And there's another group of people. So this was a study looking at people in leadership positions, having them take the imposter phenomena scale and looking at people who rated themselves highly on that. And they found, again, about half of their imposters did fit this classical profile of imposter syndrome. The other phenomena, the other half of the people who felt aligned with imposter phenomena did not actually display much anxiety about their talents, did not actually worry all the time that they were going to be failing or exposing, even though, again, they endorsed some of those things which are part of the construct. And the conclusion of that research was that maybe there's two groups of people, one which they called true imposter phenomena and the others with strategic imposter phenomena. And this sample of individuals actually was more than half male. And they described that, and the strategic, again, is not necessarily a completely conscious strategy, but a mechanism that had some self-preservative value, that if you keep lowering everyone's expectations and say that you're not so good, you're actually fitting some societal viewpoints that you should be humble, you shouldn't overrate yourself, you should lower, not that you should lower people's expectations, but if you lower their expectations, then when you do succeed, they'll be more impressed or happy with you. So some of the concern is maybe there's two different groups of people, and maybe the second one has only evolved over time now that we're more aware of imposter phenomena. So the third thing that imposter phenomena, and this is where it's gotten some of the most backlash recently, is that it should not be applied to conditions where people are actually being discriminated against, either because they're women or people of color, or they have barriers set up in their place so that they are actually not even allowed. So if you're in a situation where the assumption is you are inferior because you're a woman, or you are inferior because you're a person of color, or you are inferior because you're gay or lesbian or have ADHD, then that by definition wouldn't actually fit imposter phenomena. Because again, this is where people are achieving by society's standards and yet are feeling that they're not. And there's a whole backlash which feels that we are framing a sociologic problem, which is, again, the undervaluing of certain people as a personal failing. And again, that's why the avoidance of imposter syndrome and calling it imposter phenomena, and using it, if we're using it at all, again, to that very narrow niche of people where this might be largely a white lady problem, except again, it's not that gender specific. So jumping over to ADHD and the overlap between imposter syndrome, and I would argue that anyone who has a neurotypical brain or condition or process is going to be set up in our society as it exists now for imposter phenomena, because they are doing things in a different way by a different path. And even if they achieve the same level of success or achieve the same recognition or accomplish the same goals, or what looks like the same goals, almost always they're arriving there by a different pathway. And often they know that those pathways are disapproved of, shunned, not liked by society. So they often have taken efforts to hide how different they are. That actually is a pretty good push along the direction of developing imposter phenomena. Specifically, some of the things with ADHD are what I would call timing factors. So there's kids with ADHD who to do a report or presentation as good as their peers need to take 4 times as long, partly because they're being distracted, they're going down rabbit holes, they're not spending as much of that time focused on the project itself, but they know they need to take way more time to accomplish it. And again, that would seem to suggest to them, I'm not as smart. I needed to take 4 times as long as Billy to do the homework problems for math class. So even if I got as many right answers, taking a greater amount of time in our society is often used itself as a measure of you failed or you didn't do as well. On the other hand, the time factor can come in the other direction, often with ADHD. So I was talking to the mother of a kid, both mother and kid have ADHD, and kid had an essay due for weeks and weeks and weeks. Mother was trying to get him to do it. She herself wasn't reminding him as frequently and regularly as she would have liked. And they had a half-hour drive to the kid's school. They're driving to school on the day it's due, and mom says, have you done your essay yet? And he said, no, and sat in the car typing away. In a half hour, completed what was supposed to be several weeks worth of essay. And his description of his process was, I don't know, I think I was just thinking it through before I could get any of it into writing, and certainly the pressure of last minute. But again, that route or pathway of, if I could toss it off in just a half hour of work, I'm not achieving it. I'm not succeeding by the same way my other classmates are. I'm not smart in the same way those are. So that, again, is a recipe for imposter phenomena. And a third aspect of ADHD, or at least one more, is blanking on this for a second. It will come around to, is one of the definitions of ADHD, or pseudo definitions, is people who are consistently inconsistent. So if when conditions were optimal, I completed, I did well on this test, or I made this report for the team, or I finished this set of coding and it was brilliant. But they know themselves that next time it may take twice as long. Next time they may get distracted and never complete it. Next time they may not find ways to summon their A game and bring it. So they themselves know that they're likely to be inconsistent, and yet they're being praised or held up to their previous best success. Again, that is a perfect setup for developing an imposter phenomenon, where you believe that one success doesn't really represent who I am. So to be clear, it's not that everyone with ADHD develops imposter phenomena. For one thing, there's 2 big groups, I would argue, that don't even come close to it. One is people whose ADHD is so severe that even if they do have talent or skills or intelligence, that they actually never produce or achieve anything by society standards. That I have worked with people like that, who are every bit as smart as people who were acclaimed and successful, but whose ADD was of such severity, such magnitude, that they essentially never got anything done. And these aren't even situations where perfectionism was the major problem. So that, again, would not, if you're not achieving at all, by definition, imposter phenomena doesn't meet you. And there's certainly a group of, and it's better studied in children with ADHD, and particularly in boys. And one of my earliest talks on this channel is on positive illusory bias. So these are people with ADHD, and in some studies it's up to a third of boys with ADHD have an overvalued impression of their own talents and abilities. So they think they're the fastest runner in the class and the smartest at math and everything else. So most kids do overvalue their own achievements and their family's achievements. That's a normal part of youth. But these kids are overestimating themselves even more than the usual. And 2 other things. Usually overvaluing your own abilities or talents does help you to work harder in a difficult situation. So if you think I'm really good at math, but this puzzle's really challenging me, you work harder to finish it than if you think, I'm lousy at math, I'll never get this. Well, kids with positive illusory bias don't work harder when they're lagging behind or not finishing anything. It doesn't seem that normal motivating purpose. And the other thing is that most kids learn from their mistakes or recalibrate. So if they think I'm the fastest kid in this class and consistently Roger is beating them in the 50-yard dash or to run around the baseball field, then they know, okay, I'm the second best kid at running in the class. Kids with positive illusory bias, even when they receive negative feedback, continue thinking that they're great and wonderful and the top of everything. So again, that doesn't fit imposter phenomena. So unfortunately, I've been talking too long, explaining, not saying a lot. What can we do about this? So one thing that tends to be ineffective is a therapist just saying, you're really good, try to believe you're really good. Because in some ways, that's feeding into that dynamic of the world giving them one message, the family giving them another. Why would they believe anyone siding on one side or the other? How does that help resolve it? More powerful than an individual therapist is some evidence that group therapy, particularly with other individuals who are struggling with imposter phenomena from the same reason, either they're women or they have ADHD or something else, that may form a more valid, reliable, trustworthy to the individual assessment of how well they're really performing, and may be able to help reassess and develop a more true and accurate acceptance of their strengths. Cognitive behavioral therapy is certainly employed and effective, and particularly targeting automatic negative thoughts and the black and white thinking. So a lot of what's going on is again along the lines of perfectionism. If I'm not the top scorer, I did lousy on the test. So it's allowing, no, there's actually a pretty broad range of performances on the test. So negative self-assessments that are automatic can be made more conscious and challenged and revised with cognitive behavioral therapy. Certainly a significant part of imposter phenomena is shame. And I think DBT has one of the most powerful and effective ways of dealing with shame. Again, one of my earlier talks is, I'm forgetting the exact title, but confronting or decreasing the shame of ADHD. And essentially, if ADHD is what's contributing the imposter phenomena, it's acknowledging, yes, you're different. Yes, you're getting there by different routes, but that doesn't mean you aren't intelligent. And in fact, if you're succeeding, you probably are. But specifically targeting, identifying the component that's shame and saying, yes, I did this. This is how I do it. And it's not particularly shameful. And saying that out loud and to an audience seems particularly helpful. Fourth approach is along the lines of some of this is, and I usually say, except for the 6 perfect people on earth, you're probably going to make some mistakes. And I say it that way because if you just tell people, nobody's perfect, who listens to that? It's such a cliche. You say it, it goes in one ear out the other. If you say, except for the 6 perfect people on earth, people think, 6 people, well, who would that be? And then they say, oh, so they're bringing to themselves a realization or articulating it for themselves that aren't perfect people. So getting rid of that image that there is something perfect or that perfection is possible, and forgiving themselves for being human, not being perfect. Other approaches that seem to be helpful are affirmations that used to reaffirm the real successes. Again, people with imposter phenomena, once they've achieved something, they're on to the next thing and worrying about they'll be exposed on the next chance. They're not relishing, they're not celebrating. And part of that's a common human phenomena that once something is over, it's over. Why would you need to hold on to it? What's in front of you, the struggles you're still facing, or the worries that the next time you're going to fail loom much louder. So your ledger sheet is highly skewed because even all these successes here just drop off the page, whereas all these failures are remaining there in your conscious mind. You're reinforcing them, you're remembering them. So again, affirmations are helpful. And one of the affirmations I like, this might date me a bit, but Al Franken was a comedian before he was a senator, before he was retired as a senator. Was a comedian on Saturday Night Live, and one of his characters was Stuart Smalley, who did these affirmations of you're smart enough, look in the mirror and say you're smart enough, you're good enough, and God, gosh darn it, doggone it, people like you. And it was meant to be silly and over the top, but it's actually an amazingly, for many people, powerful, true, and helpful. And particularly if you can see the humor in it, because humor is one of the most effective, powerful ways of breaking up preconceived notions and reframing things. And then the last approach for dealing with imposter phenomena is what I talked about a few months back, my quest, not test framing. So again, almost all the studies, more than 80% of the studies looking at imposter phenomena have been looking at it in people in academics, nursing students, medical students, MD, PhD students, engineering students. I mean, part of it is it's easiest for psychologists who are university-based to look at a group of students. And again, part of it, this is dealing with academic, or sorry, I keep saying and overlapping, and this is an important distinction. Intellectual success and achievement is not always perfectly correlated with academic success or achievement, but the whole academic setup is very test oriented, you have to pass this is a measure of this, when lots of these are highly artificial measures. Lots of them don't correlate that well with true intelligence or ability to solve problems or ability to achieve contentment and satisfaction with life. So again, my approach is to focus on what is your quest? What are your values? What are you trying to do in life? And spend less time focusing on each little test, because each little test is just a path along the way. Whether it leads you further along the way or whether that step is blocked, you can find steps to go around, over, under, through it, get there in a different way. So that is about all I have to say about imposter phenomena. And I do see some questions, so I will get to them right now. Next week's topic is going to be on breathing and ADHD and whether that is a possible way of improving symptoms. So Anita, or I'm not sure. So, thank you for making. So thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Some of this is our thank yous. So Dennis is, imposter feelings come and go for me. They usually rear their head whenever I achieve something, but I've learned to laugh at myself and keep pushing on. So great. Dennis has sort of embraced that humor is one of the most potent forms of medicine. And one of the healthiest defense strategies is to learn to laugh at yourself. And I think that is a useful skill. And we certainly see some of the people I would argue are making the most destruction in the world and biggest fools on themselves have very, very limited ability to laugh at themselves. I won't say any more in specifying who I'm thinking of. So stay healthy, stay happy. I'm glad that people are listening and learning from what I have to say. And if imposter phenomena is part of what you're dealing with, there are ways to work through it. So that's all.